It's Moira. That's right, I'm not gonna bullshit you with some 30-second intro like all these other YouTubers. If you want to have the easiest time climbing ranks in Overwatch as support, Moira is undoubtedly the best support for doing so, and you'll even see some of the top 500 spots in the leaderboard be populated with Moira. I bet you thought I was either gonna say Baptiste or Kiriko judging by the thumbnail, unless I obviously change it in the future. But what does best actually mean? Why do I think Moira is the best support right now, and how do you actually win games with her in Overwatch 2? Well, I hope to have all of those answers covered in this video. I know that I ranked Moira pretty low in my easiest to hardest supports video, but I did mention that she could go up with more experimentation. So let's start off with what best actually means. Simply put, I think it's the hero that has the highest reward in the game for the lowest cost, meaning it's the best investment you can make. Since there may be some new viewers on the channel, let me use a Dogecoin example I previously used to make things clearer. For example, say we invested 50 cents into Elon Musk's favorite cryptocurrency, Dogecoin, and say that we actually made $50,000 the next day, so the cost is 50 cents and the reward is $50,000. Say we also made a similar investment where we actually put 10 cents into Dogecoin at a different time and we end up making $40,000. Whilst we would have made more money and more reward with the first investment, we could argue that the second investment is proportionally more worth it and therefore better because of the lower cost. To help illustrate this further, here's a simple cost against reward graph and where I have each support at. As you can see, I have Moira being a relatively low cost but high reward hero for most players. Kiriko and to a lesser extent Lucio, Baptiste and Ana have relatively high costs and high rewards. Zenyatta I think has too much risk for the reward he's getting, Brig I just think she's kind of mid all around, and if you're playing Mercy, well, have fun. Let's break down cost into 4 simple factors. The mechanical cost of the hero, so how hard does it take to actually aim with the hero. The cost of risk, so how much risk am I taking to get any sort of meaningful reward out of the hero. Cooldowns / time investment, just meaning how much time does it take for me to get my reward, whether that be through my cooldowns or whether it be time taken during flanking. And finally, the last factor is resource creation or denial. Resource is just anything you can think of in the game, being space, attention, healing, utility, damage, etc. I'll be showing why Moira succeeds in most, if not all of these categories, especially when compared to her contemporary supports, and throughout, especially in the last category, you'll see how to actually play this version of Moira that I am talking about. Starting off with the first category, mechanics. This should be pretty self-explanatory, so I won't spend too much time on it, but obviously, Moira requires very little aim to get any value out of. Her damage beam has lock-on, her orbs have a 4 meter radius and travel quite fast, so all you need to do is toss it in the general direction of the enemy team, and her ultimate is a thick piercing beam. It's not really controversial at all to say Moira is the easiest mechanical support in Overwatch. There are fade jumps you can do, but those aren't necessary or required to fulfill Moira's aggressive, DPS oriented playstyle, which I'll get onto later. Now, if we compare Moira to a hero like Kiriko or even Ana, we can see that the gap is evident. Kiriko has to land tiny, slow moving projectiles to the head, and Ana has to have pinpoint aim in order to get any value, not to mention the skill shot in her sleep darts. So that's the first category done. What about risk? Well, this leads me on to Moira's playstyle, which can be high risk at times. Essentially, on Moira, you'll be looking to duel or trade out on the enemy backline, particularly with your coalescence, either to get kills or to allow your team to follow up on the trade that you're making. This example here on Soccer Royale is a great example of this, where I trade out 1v3 or even 1v4 on the enemy Ashe, Widowmaker, Kiriko and Ana, allowing my team to destroy the one remaining tank. I'll refer to this clip later in the 4th category of resource creation, but you can quite clearly see here that this is a risky play to make. One headshot by the enemy Widowmaker, one sleep dot landed by the enemy Ana, or even a few headshots by the enemy Kiriko, and it's over. I go from carrying to feeding. In order to minimize this risk, however, you need to utilize cover and optimize timing. The reason why you need cover is to be able to dodge things like sleep dart, which can stop your play entirely. And when I say you need to optimize timing, you need to be timing this coalescence when your team are baiting or drawing attention away from the front line. This way, the enemy Widowmaker isn't looking at you, at least during the start of your aggressive play. Now, if we compare this risk to a hero like Kiriko, I'm not gonna lie, Kiriko has quite a bit less risk. For those who have watched my Kiriko guide, you'd know that Kiriko is supposed to be on flanks, either getting ready to peel for her other support or to aggress onto the enemy team, like this example on Blizzard World. As you can see here, Kiriko's teleport is a lot more unpredictable and less punishable than Moira's fade, and Kiriko Suzu can prevent a life and death situation. In essence, There should be no reason why you as Kiriko should die here, whereas with Moira, your fade can only go so far. Quite literally. The one thing I will say that Moira has over the other supports though, is her self-sustain, and this can reduce the risk by quite a bit. Moira's fade is instant, she has her own self-heal when she damages, and she has her own heal orb, which does 75 healing per second. Her ultimate also gives Moira 50 healing per second. This makes Moira quite a tough hero to get rid of if you're dueling her, especially if you can't land any big form of burst damage onto her. Lastly, Moira can be a low risk hero if you do play her to farm your coalescence. This is actually doable in Overwatch 2 in some situations, depending on the map and your team's composition. If you're running a reset and they're getting absolutely manhandled, then giving them a quick burst of healing before you go off on DPS can still be beneficial without putting your life at risk. Moving on to the third category, cooldowns. Again, this is a relatively simple category in which Moira does pretty well in, I'd say. Her get out of jail free card, being her fade, is on a 6-second cooldown, and her biotic orb, whilst being on a 10-second cooldown, because you get value up to 7 seconds after you use your orb, the cooldown can actually feel shorter than it actually is. Compare this to Baptiste, whose immortality field is on a 25-second cooldown, Lucio, whose speed boost is on a 12-second cooldown, Ana, whose nade and sleep dart are both on double-digit cooldowns, or Kiriko, whose protection Suzu rests on a 14-second cooldown, and it's easy to see why a hero like Moira wins out the cooldown cost section. Lastly, onto resource creation and denial. Now, I think we all know that Moira has no direct utility. Her entire kit is literally just healing and damage. No crowd control, no cleansing effect, no speed boost, no damage resistance or amplification, no immortality, no nothing. However, I'd argue that Moira indirectly creates the most amount of resources a support can create, barring Kiriko. Let's refer back to that Circuit Royale example, and for reference, this is a Diamond 3 match. Here, I want you to keep track of the resources I trade out, just through the use of my Coalescence and Fade. I don't even use my damage orb here. First, I trade out Coach Gun, Kiriko's Suzu, Ana's Sleep Dart, and Ana's Nade just from one Coalescence. Now that's just the cooldowns. Look at the attention I draw away from my team. The Ashe looks at me and is forced to run away, the Widowmaker looks at me to take a shot, the Ana is looking at me to try and land her cooldowns, and the Kiriko is by proxy forced to use her Suzu. At worst, I'm trading out 1v3 here and landing 2 kills. And that's not even all. I also create an absurd amount of space for my team because the enemy team aren't helping out their frontline. I mean, how can they when they're too busy looking at me? And this is where the strength of Moira lies in, especially in Overwatch 2. Back in Overwatch 1, there'd be way more stuns to stop your Coalescence, and there would be an off tank to mark you. But nowadays, Moira's Coalescence receives a massive indirect buff due to the lack of CC. You are encouraged to go for these type of plays. But what about if you haven't got your ultimate on Moira? Well, that's when you go on mid-fight flanks. Here's Tesla, a top 500 Moira player who is doing an unranked GM, doing exactly this. He fades in the mid-fight to duel a Widowmaker, and then proceeds to duel a Hanzo, directly helping his team to win the fight. It's important to note that if you are going to go for this playstyle, you need to be heal orbing in most situations. The extra 50 DPS you get from damage orb just isn't worth the self-heal that you get out of your heal orb. With all this being said, there is a silver lining. Not every aggressive play you make is going to go well, and you do have your limit on Moira. There's a reason why the pros are playing Kiriko over Moira right now, and that's because of Kiriko's teleport and her ultimate. However, if Moira is populating the top 500 leaderboards, and top 500 Moira players are seeing success across the majority of ranks, then I definitely think you should give her a go. Anyways, that's the video. If you enjoyed, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, and if this video helped to raise your IQ, be sure to share it with your friends to also raise theirs. Until next time.